Ryuji gazed over a field filled with healthy crops and he noticed that they were growing well. His comrade Rene thanked him and his enchantment for it. The mud golem powered by magic stones kept monsters and animals away, and with the magic stones that helped plants grow, the crops were doing very well. Ryuji also praised Rene for her potions because they improved the soil. Rene was speechless but thanked Ryuji. Then an elf girl named Rana called out to them, saying dinner was ready. Feeling completely happy, Ryuji as an enchanter was determined to live a relaxed life with everyone. He and Rene turned to Rana and said they would be there. Ryuji was called by Guy, their party leader, and he asked what it was about. Since all their other companions were out on missions, he decided to take a day off. But Guy interrupted him, saying that from that day on he was no longer part of the party. Ryuji was confused. Guy asked if he didn't realize how useless he was in fighting. Ryuji admitted he was useless because he was a support enchanter. He reminded Guy that he was told to focus on making magic stones to help everyone. He could only enchant people on the spot, which made him wonder if that wasn't enough. Expecting him to fight like Manori or Suzu, the swordsman and mage, was unfair. Guy couldn't expect him to do the same work. Then Guy angrily said this was why they couldn't move up in rank. The party was second class, but Ryuji was still stuck at third class. Berserk couldn't be seen as a second-class party. At this rate, Ryuji should forget about reaching first class. They would be stuck at third class forever. However, Ryuji only winked at his current crisis. Guy had incorporated his stepsisters, Manori and Suzu, into the party they originally formed with him. Guy had approached them from the start, and this made Ryuji realize that Guy had intended to kick him out. Having Sean take Manori and Suzu out that morning was part of the plan. However, Guy told Ryuji not to accuse people based on speculation, although he did believe that trash should be thrown out. At that moment, Ryuji went along with Guy. He understood him, but he said that he was the one who wanted to leave. He would be taking back all the magic stones he had lent to Guy. Imagine quitting and turning the situation around on the way out. Guy was confused and asked what he meant, reminding Ryuji that the magic stones were shared party property. Then Ryuji showed their contract, proving that when he gave the stones, it was a loan, not a transfer. If Guy didn't return them, Ryuji was ready to take the matter to court. Left with no choice, Guy returned all the magic stones. Ryuji looked carefully at all of them but noticed the sublimation stone was missing. For someone who looked down on enchanters, Guy clearly depended on magic stones. Furious, Guy told Ryuji to be quiet. He threw the stone, asking if that was good enough. Ryuji caught the stone with one hand, playfully praising Guy for a good throw. That finished collecting all the stones, so he said goodbye to Guy. He also told him to say hello to Manori and Suzu. After that intense encounter, Ryuji went to a pub. That said, he had some funds but had no concrete plans. Plus, he was leaving his stepsisters behind like that. However, he quickly changed his mindset as there was no use dwelling on it. With their skills, they should be fine and they could just meet up later. Anyway, whatever he did, he needed to start by making connections. Just then, his thoughts stopped when he heard someone complaining nearby. The person said they no longer wanted to work with someone. A girl named Renee asked her teammate Marie why. Frustrated, Marie explained that Renee was an alchemist, but all she made were potions. Girl, that's literally the job. It was too much work for her to finish requests. Ryuji had overheard everything, which made him wonder if getting kicked out was becoming common. However, he knew this wasn't his problem. Renee told Marie that since she wasn't good at fighting, she made attack potions. Marie angrily said that was exactly the problem. She had to fight to get results and then share the rewards with Renee, who didn't help. It was completely unfair. Besides, she had already decided to join Berserk, so Renee was leaving. Marie didn't wait for Renee to answer and quickly left. Having seen everything, Ryuji approached Renee, asking if he could join her. Renee, who had been crying, asked Ryuji who he was. Ryuji said he was the one her companion was switching to. He was the guy who got kicked out of Berserk. Ryuji apologized for eavesdropping. Renee wanted to say it was okay, but before she could, Ryuji introduced himself. He told her his name and that he was a third-class enchanter. Renee introduced herself and said she was a third-class alchemist. She shared that her party had just broken up and started crying again. Then, Ryuji gave her a handkerchief, telling her to wipe her tears first. He guessed she had a lot on her mind, but they were both outcasts now. He suggested they drink for now, which Renee agreed to. However, she was underage and couldn't drink alcohol. She still wanted to join him, though. As they spent time together, Ryuji told Renee everything that happened to him. Guy, their leader, told him to leave. Coincidentally, he and Renee were in the same situation. Just then, Renee told Ryuji to call her casually, and Ryuji wanted the same. However, Ryuji was younger and seemed to want to use honorifics. Then, Ryuji asked Renee if she didn't mind showing him one of her potions. He was curious about what she could make. Renee was excited and agreed. She showed him two unique bottles of her potions, saying they were some of her recent creations. Ryuji held one, but Renee warned him that while it was safe to touch the bottles, he shouldn't touch the lids or pins. Ryuji seemed surprised but understood. Renee explained that one of the potions took a long time to make, and she was especially proud of it. She began to explain the important details, but Ryuji was lost in his own thoughts. The outside of the potion didn't look unusual. As for what was inside, he wanted to use his magic to check it out. He used his appraisal skill and found it was a mix of fire and a bomb. Then he realized it was something that could create flames. The range was 1 meter around and the power and length surprised him. He told Renee it was stronger than Suzu's magic, the mage from Berserk. Renee was surprised and thought it couldn't be true. It had almost 4 times the power and duration of Suzu's, who was called a genius mage. If Ryuji added his enchantment, it would be even stronger. Ryuji asked if making it was impressive, and Renee agreed. But Marie had told her the materials were very expensive. She admitted it was hard but wanted to make good things. She wanted to make the best and help people in need. Ryuji was quiet, then agreed she was right. They might be similar, which confused Renee. As an enchanter, Ryuji took pride in his skills and creations. That was why when their value was fully realized, that moment would be incredibly satisfying. Renee was excited by his speech, but before she could say more, Ryuji noticed an argument nearby. A bald adventurer complained to the waiter that things were unfair. After finishing a request, he always had beer and meat. He bragged that he was a second-class adventurer and angrily asked the waiter if he knew who made the town successful. The waiter said the meat the adventurer wanted was rare and they didn't have it now. Ryuji wondered what was happening and saw the timing was perfect. Renee noticed the adventurer was very drunk because of the strong smell. She asked Ryuji what to do, so he thought of a plan. Ryuji said it wouldn't be fair to make a move without showing his hand. He grabbed one of Renee's potions and said he'd borrow it. She was surprised, but Ryuji didn't wait for her answer. He approached the adventurer, who seemed to know him. The adventurer asked what he wanted, but Ryuji said nothing, only that he hoped the adventurer could be quieter since they were trying to drink peacefully. The adventurer thought Ryuji was bold and asked his rank. Ryuji said he was a third-class enchanter, which made the adventurer laugh. He was a third class and an enchanter, someone who didn't fight on the front lines, yet he acted proud. Renee watched nervously while Ryuji stood firm. He sighed, saying that guy was the same, but everyone always cared about ranks. He thought other things mattered too. The adventurer got angry and quickly threw a punch. He was mad at Ryuji for talking nonsense and ruining his drink. This was Ryuji's chance to show his wind magic, whirlwind. The adventurer deserved it for mocking him for not fighting up front. Suddenly, a big wave of wind and flames hit, sending the adventurer flying. Ryuji showed no mercy and said this was the pride of craftsmen. When the dust settled, the adventurer crashed to the floor. Ryuji stared at him, making the adventurer shake and run away. Everyone was shocked, especially Renee. People praised Ryuji for being amazing. Even though they didn't know what he did, they thought it was very powerful. Renee tried to say how impressed she was, but Ryuji smiled and said they should pay and leave. They couldn't talk calmly there. Soon, they went to a nearby fountain. Ryuji told Renee her potion was as amazing as he thought. If he had used it as it was, the tavern would have been destroyed. Renee guessed it was Ryuji's enchantment, and he confirmed it. He explained he had added wind magic to control the flames. To stop the fire from spreading, he directed and compressed it with wind to lower its power so the adventurer wouldn't be seriously hurt. He told Renee that if they added enchantments to potions like that, they could make them stronger or easier to use. That was why he wanted to ask if she wanted to team up. Renee asked if that meant forming a party. Ryuji said it was more than that. As a craftsman, he admired her creations. He wanted to build a workshop together, combining their skills and living a relaxed life that others would envy. He wanted to show the world how great enchanters and alchemists could be. Renee was stunned, thinking about the possibilities of building a workshop together. Ryuji asked what she thought of it, as he believed it was not a bad proposal. Renee was teed and she said she would love to. Just then, Mr. Ian, the guild master, approached Ryuji, asking if it was true that he had left Berserk and would also leave town. Ryuji confirmed it was true, and even Renee was kicked out of her party. Renee suddenly thanked Mr. Emin for everything he had done for them. Mr. Emin said that the guild's policy was not to interfere in internal party disputes, but he couldn't help but wonder about Minori and Suzu. Renee recognized them, and Ryuji also told her that they were Berserk swordsman and mage. They were also his stepsisters, which surprised Renee. With that, Ryuji told Mr. Emin to give something to his sisters without Guy finding out. Mr. Emin was speechless, but he agreed to pass it on. He then asked Ryuji where he planned to go from there. Ryuji shared that they were thinking of settling down in a distant town, and there they would set up a workshop together. Mr. Ian understood, and he was sure they would meet again. He told Ryuji to take care until then, and he reassured him that he would look after Manori and Suzu. Ryuji thanked Mr. Emin, and Renee told him to take care. After that, Ryuji and Renee started their journey. Just then, Renee asked Ryuji if they were going to Solstedt, and he said yes. That place had a highway and a nearby magic stone mine, making it a perfect place to set up a workshop. It would take about half a month on foot, though. Renee realized it was going to be quite a long journey, even if it was to save on expenses. They had been kicked out and had no income source. It couldn't be helped in that case. They needed funds to set up the workshop, too. However, Ryuji was optimistic, and he said they had plenty of time. He suggested taking it easy, and Renee thought it sounded good. With that, Ryuji looked forward to working with Renee, and she felt the same way. That night, deep in the forest, something bad happened. A man approached a group of knights, and from their armor, he guessed they were from the royal army. The man was a bandit with some friends. He commented on the knights' fine clothes, which he thought were gifts from taxpayers. The knights were alarmed and told Lady Setsi to stay behind them. The bandit leader warned he wouldn't say it again. He wanted them to give up all their valuables. Could this be a sign of trouble before reaching the frontier? As Ryuji and Renee continued their journey, they decided to camp for the night. Renee guessed they would reach Solstedt the next day, and Ryuji agreed. Then she asked why he became an enchanter. Ryuji said it was a long story but shared it after they set up a campfire. There was an empire called Sakura at the eastern edge of the continent, which was also his homeland. The country's name came from the cherry blossom, the national flower. They bloomed around that time of the year. Because of the civil war, Ryuji wasn't sure if that scenery could still be seen now. Renee was surprised to learn about the civil war, and Ryuji was saddened to confirm it. That was when he lost his parents. Back when he was 12, he left the country with his sisters, Minori and Suzu, who also lost their families in the civil war. Renee thought it must have been tough, and Ryuji admitted it really was. However, their teacher took them in and taught them the skills to survive. Renee seemed curious about their teacher, but even Ryuji didn't know their name until the end, so they just called them teacher. They were strict, but they trained them in basic combat skills and simple magic techniques. It was their teacher who recognized Ryuji's aptitude for enchantment. Thanks to that, it was now his calling. Also, that teacher was an elf, just like Renee. That was one of the reasons why he couldn't leave her alone. He couldn't stand seeing her being used by those who didn't understand her true value. Ryuji guessed he had made her go along with his self-satisfaction, and he was sorry for that. He bowed before her, but Renee frantically told him to stop it. She said they were kindred spirits, so he shouldn't worry about it. Besides, at that time, she was happy that he reached out to her. Ryuji was surprised, but he was relieved to know that everything was good. Just then, Ryuji remembered the medicine he showed Renee in the tavern. He wanted to show her some magic stones, too, which she was eager to see. When Ryuji handed them to Renee, she was in awe. She asked if they were truly magic stones, as they looked like huge gems. Ryuji then told her that the effects depended on how well they were cut. From left to right, they were the adamantine stone, the severe cold stone, and the anti-magic stone. Then, just as Ryuji was about to explain the effects, Renee sensed something nearby. Ryuji asked what was wrong, and Renee said that she could hear something from a tree. There were voices arguing and metal clashing in that direction. She couldn't make out the conversation clearly, but from the way they were talking, they were probably bandits. All this talk about arguing, voices, and metal clashing at that distance was something they couldn't ignore. Ryuji thought that if bandits were involved, they might be targeted too. He insisted on helping, and he asked Renee if she could fight. She confirmed she could and would be fine, but they had to hurry. With that, Ryuji urged them to go. While they were at it, he wanted to show Renee the effects of the magic stones in action. Meanwhile, the battle between the knights and the bandits kept on. One of the bandits mocked a knight, asking why his movement had slowed down. The leader of the knights told his men not to falter, as they must protect Lady Setsi at all costs. Finally, Ryuji and Renee arrived at the scene. Renee pointed at the fight, and Ryuji confirmed he could see them. Just then, he asked Renee to draw their attention. Renee reassured him that he could leave it to her. Just then, she used her magic to summon the arrow of flame, commanding it to pierce the enemy before her and burst into flames. The fire arrow was released, burning one of the bandits to a crisp. The leader of the bandits quickly noticed it, and he suspected it was reinforcements for the knights. Suddenly, Ryuji appeared sarcastically, asking if he could join in. The bandit he faced called him a bastard, and he immediately went in for the kill. However, Ryuji intercepted the attack with his staff, and he kicked the bandit with immense force, sending him flying. Ryuji wondered if this was all they had. Compared to Minori's swordsmanship, this was child's play. Suddenly, the leader of the bandits approached from behind, telling Ryuji that his back was wide open. He slashed his sword at Ryuji, but to his shock, the weapon bounced back. Sword bounced off like, "No bro, I quit too." Ryuji stood there unfazed while the knights and Lady Setsi were shocked. The leader of the bandits couldn't believe that the sword bounced off. So Ryuji broke it to him that he used the adamantine stone. Suddenly, he punched the bandit in his gut, explaining that the stone's effect was the nullification of physical attacks against the bearer. At that moment, Renee used her web of lightning to envelop the bandits. With her electric web, all the bandits were subdued. Ryuji then approached her asking if that was all of them, to which she said yes. Renee approached one of the knights asking if they were all right. The knight confirmed they were, and he thanked her for her help. Just then Lady Setsi approached them and was about to speak, but the knight warned her that she mustn't. Ryuji understood that there were circumstances, so he reassured them not to worry about it. They had only intervened to ensure their own safety while camping. The knight appreciated his consideration, and he told Ryuji to leave the handling of the bandits to them. Just then, Renee approached the knight, hoping that she wasn't overstepping. She wanted to ask if he needed any healing medicine. Although his injuries seemed minor, there were still wounds and bleeding. The knight was unsure, which was something Ryuji understood. It was medicine offered by strangers, and it was only natural to be hesitant. Suddenly, Ryuji remembered that he had been scratched by some plants when they rushed in to help. It was perfect timing. He grabbed the medicine from Renee, which confused her. He then poured it on the scratch, reassuring the knight that there was nothing suspicious in it. He then asked if the knight wanted some. The other knights quickly jumped at the opportunity, prompting the leader to call them out. However, Lady Setsi told Diet, the leader, that it was fine. He dead-ass sounds like a salad. She reassured him that she would take responsibility if anything happened. He wanted to argue, but he was suddenly cut off when Ryuji spoke. He introduced himself and told them about his plans of opening a workshop in Salto, and if they wanted the medicine, they should go visit them. After that, he explained to Renee that he responded appropriately, assuming they were nobles from the conversation, but he was sorry for involving her. He was also sorry for using the medicine without her permission. Renee thought the issue about the nobles was fine, but she pointed out that Ryuji startled her when he used the medicine so suddenly. Ryuji explained that it was natural for them to be curious, and as knights it was the right action, but even so having Renee's goodwill doubted didn't feel good. He quickly walked away, but Renee was smiling behind him. She thought that it was so like him to act like that. Ryuji then stretched his muscles, saying it was late and that they should return to camp. Renee agreed and insisted they rest for the day and prepare for tomorrow. Salstedt was located at the southwesternmost part of the continent, and it was a strategic point of the Bystein Kingdom because of its port, or so it should be. Strategic point for what? Seasonal depression. The town wasn't as lively as Ryuji had expected. Renee agreed, and even the Adventurers Guild was in that state. Ryuji then spoke to Anne the clerk and said that they would like to transfer there. However, he wondered if this was really Salstedt. Anne was a little nervous, but she admitted he was right. Roads to the north and east, a mine nearby facing the sea, an important transportation hub. That was Salstedt. Renee was curious that she used the word was, so Anne went on to explain that things had changed about a year ago. The mine's magic stone production decreased and it was abandoned. A great earthquake hit the southwestern part of the continent and destroyed the port, and there was still no prospect of recovery. Moreover, with the completion of new roads, alternative routes for transport and trade were established. The flow of people had drastically decreased. Ryuji thought it was troublesome, yet it was quite expected. He asked Renee what they should do and if it was okay to process their transfer request. She replied that if he was okay with it, she would be too. Just then, he told her the truth. He actually had a reason why they had to transfer to Saltstedt. After telling what it was, he asked again if she was sure it was okay to transfer there. Renee said yes, that is if it wasn't a problem for him. Besides, after hearing his reason, she thought they should prioritize that. She reassured him not to worry about it, so Ryuji thanked her. With that, Anne told them that the transfer procedure was complete. She looked forward to working with them. Renee had the same sentiments and she thanked Anne. Just then, Renee informed Anne that they were planning to set up a workshop in town and they wanted to look for a property. In that case, Anne introduced them to an official at the Commerce Guild. Soon after, they met Thor, whom Anne had informed about the situation. As they went to see the property, Renee pointed out that it was quite a walk. Thor agreed that it was, and it was a bit far from the town center. The rent and convenience were good, and it was suitable for a workshop. Finally, they arrived at the property that Thor had proposed to them. Renee said it was big and Ryuji agreed, pointing out that it was almost too spacious. He asked if they could check inside and Thor agreed. As they looked around the building, Ryuji asked Renee for her thoughts. She believed it needed some cleaning, but she thought it was a good property. The forest was nearby, too. With that, Ryuji was convinced to take it. He then turned to Thor and suggested making the contract. Thor thanked him, though he didn't expect him to decide so quickly. He then excused himself to go back to the Commerce Guild to prepare the documents right away. He asked if they could wait a while, and Renee said it was fine. Before Thor could leave, Ryuji asked if it was okay if they started cleaning and doing interior work while they waited. Thor allowed it, and since they had decided to go for the contract, they should go ahead and do it. After that, Ryuji and Renee found themselves facing a huge pile of wood. Renee recalled that Thor permitted them to use the materials outside of the house as a thank you for their quick decision. However, they looked heavy. Just then, Ryuji took out the mighty armstone, suggesting that it was the part that it came in. He suddenly picked up a giant log with one hand, shocking Renee. Ryuji explained to her that with the magic stone, heavy lifting was no problem at all. In that case, Renee suggested leaving the interior work to her. With her alchemy, making furniture and repairs was a piece of cake. With that, they both decided to get started. Renee went on to create furniture with her alchemy, while Ryuji carried around heavy things that needed moving. With little time, they had made significant improvements to the house. Just then Thor came in and apologized for the wait. However, he was shocked when he saw the house's interior. He said it was amazing, as they had done that much work in such a short time. Renee was particularly proud, announcing that they had worked hard. After that, Thor handed them the contract. If they found no issues, then they should sign it. Just then, Renee noticed that Thor had a lot of luggage, and she asked if he was carrying vegetables. Thor got shy and admitted it was a bit personal. It was just hypocrisy. Renee seemed confused, so Thor went outside to explain everything. To Renee and Ryuji's surprise, two elf girls were standing behind a tree, observing them from afar. Thor approached them, and he was glad they were both there. He informed them that he brought vegetables, to which the girls thanked him for. Thor then called on Renee to come meet the girls. She thought they were adorable, and she asked who these children were. Thor apologized, as he should have introduced them to Ryuji and Renee. The girls lived next to the workshop, but they didn't have any parents. Moreover, the soil in their garden was poor and crops didn't grow. They were trying their best to harvest even a little, but it wasn't enough. Because of that, Thor had been sharing food with them like that. As Thor was telling them all this, Renee held one of the elf girl's hands, looking up to Ryuji with pity. Ryuji thought about a garden with poor soil conditions, which somehow reminded him of his rough childhood with Manori and Suzu. Just then, Ryuji decided they would use enchantment to make a garden.